Everyone online seems to be talking about the 25 Creedmoor right now. Some shooters claim it's one of the most efficient modern cartridges ever designed. Others say it's just the latest internet hype, another trendy name that will fade once the excitement dies down. So today, I decided to stop reading the arguments and do something better. I finally brought a 25 Creedmoor to the range to see what it actually does. By the end of this video, we'll answer a simple question. Is this cartridge truly impressive? Or are people just excited because it's new? Because my very first group told an interesting story. Let me show you the setup I'm working with today. The rifle is a Bergara HMR Pro chambered in 25 Creedmoor. And this isn't just a casual range day. This rifle is being prepared for an upcoming NRL Hunter match, which means everything about this system has to work together. Today's goal is simple. First, we're going to run the ammunition over the chronograph and capture real velocity data. Then we'll get the rifle properly zeroed at 100 yards. After that, I want to see what kind of accuracy this setup can produce right out of the gate. Because when you're building a competition rifle, there isn't much room for guesswork. Competition rifles don't get second chances. If this setup doesn't perform, it won't stay in the lineup for very long. Let's take a closer look at the rifle build itself. The foundation of the setup is a Bergara HMR Pro chambered in 25 Creedmoor. It's paired with a Banish 30 suppressor on the threaded barrel, which should help keep the rifle smooth and manageable during longer shooting sessions. On top sits a DNT 7235 optic, mounted with RPM precision rings and supported by an ARCA rail system underneath the rifle. That rail gives flexibility for different support options, especially when shooting from positional setups in competition. Now here's an important detail. This exact optic was previously mounted on my 300 PRC rifle. With that setup, I was able to stretch shots all the way out to 1,000 yards without any issues. Because of that experience, I have a lot of confidence in this scope and mounting system. So if something goes wrong today, I can already tell you one thing: it won't be the scope. This rifle isn't just being set up for casual range time. It's being prepared for an NRL Hunter match. And that type of competition brings a completely different kind of pressure. Stages are timed, which means you don't have the luxury of taking unlimited time to settle in behind the rifle. Targets can appear at varying distances, and many shots are taken from positional setups rather than a perfect bench rest environment. That means stability, speed, and repeatability all become critical. Every part of the system matters, from how quickly you acquire the target to how consistently the rifle returns to position after each shot. In this type of environment, small problems show up fast. That's why today's test matters. Everything in this setup needs to be fast, stable, and predictable if it's going to hold up in competition. Before we start sending rounds downrange, it's worth taking a moment to talk about the cartridge itself. The 25 Creedmoor has been gaining attention in the precision shooting community, largely because it combines a relatively efficient case design with smaller diameter projectiles known for strong aerodynamic performance. Many of the bullets used in this caliber are designed with high ballistic coefficients, which helps them maintain stability and consistency as distance increases. Because of that balance between efficiency and manageable recoil, more shooters have started experimenting with it in competition and long-range setups. But the conversation around this cartridge is far from settled. Some shooters believe the 25 Creedmoor represents the future of precision shooting. Others see it as just another niche experiment that may never move beyond a small group of enthusiasts. And that debate is part of what makes testing it today so interesting. With the rifle set up, the next step is to make sure everything is lined up properly before we start testing accuracy. I've already taken a moment to bore sight the rifle so that our first shot should be reasonably close to the target. The target is set at 100 yards, which will give us a solid baseline for zero and grouping. For ammunition, I'm running Hornady 134 grain ELD match factory rounds, which are advertised at roughly 2,800 feet per second. These are long, sleek projectiles designed for precision shooting, so they should give us a good idea of what this rifle and cartridge combination is capable of. Everything looks ready? The camera's rolling, and the rifle is steady on the rest. First shot with this rifle. Let's see where it lands. The first impact shows up slightly off from the center, but it's close enough that the bore sight clearly did its job. That gives us a solid starting point. I take a moment to check the scope adjustments, dial the corrections, and settle back in behind the rifle for the next shot. The rifle feeds smoothly, and everything about the setup feels stable so far. The second shot breaks clean, and through the optic, it's immediately obvious that the adjustment worked. That round lands extremely close to the first one, almost touching it. In fact, from this distance, it looks like the second shot may have landed nearly in the same hole. That's always a promising sign early in a range session. I make a small additional adjustment to fine-tune the zero and prepare to fire again. At this point, the rifle feels consistent, the recoil impulse is manageable, and the setup seems to be working together nicely. That second shot landed almost in the same hole, and now I'm curious to see if the next one stays with it. The pattern starts to become noticeable as the next group develops. The first two shots land extremely close together, almost touching on the paper. From behind the scope, it looks like the rifle is stacking them perfectly, and for a moment it feels like this could be an excellent group. I take a breath, settle back into position, and press the trigger for the third shot. When the impact appears on the target, the result changes the picture. The third round lands just outside the pair, opening the group more than expected. I pause and think it might simply be a small mistake on my part, so I decide to shoot another group to confirm. Once again, the first two shots land very close together, nearly forming the same tight cluster. Then the third shot breaks and the same thing happens again. It drifts away from the pair and opens the group. At this point, the pattern is hard to ignore, and I start wondering what might be causing it. With a few groups on paper, the next step is to look at the velocity data coming from the chronograph. This gives us a clearer picture of how consistent the factory ammunition is performing through this rifle. After running several rounds across the sensor, the numbers start to settle in. The average velocity comes in at right around 2,801 feet per second, which lines up very closely with what the manufacturer advertises for this load. Looking a little deeper into the consistency, the standard deviation reads 12, and the extreme spread comes in at 43. Those numbers aren't record-breaking, but they are solid for factory ammunition straight out of the box. In other words, nothing here looks unusual or concerning. For factory ammunition, that's not bad. After collecting the targets and measuring the groups, the results start to paint a clearer picture of how this rifle is performing. The first group measures about 1.10 inches. The second tightens up to around 0.89, and the third comes in at roughly 0.82. When you average those three groups together, the result lands at approximately 0.94 MOA. What's interesting is that most of the shots are clustering very tightly, with two rounds often landing nearly on top of each other, while a third shot occasionally opens the group slightly. Even with that pattern, the overall performance is still quite solid. Considering this is a brand new rifle, running factory ammunition, and this is the very first trip to the range with the setup, the numbers are encouraging. For a brand new rifle on its first outing, that's actually pretty respectable. Looking back at the groups, there are a few possible factors that could explain why they opened up slightly. During one of the strings, the leg of the lead sled actually slipped off the edge of the table, which could easily introduce some movement into the shot. Another detail is the rail interface under the rifle. The Arca-style rail creates a somewhat square contact surface in the rest, and that may not be the most stable fit for the way the rifle is currently supported. There's also the trigger weight to consider. At roughly 2.5 pounds from the factory, it's perfectly usable, but it may still be a little heavier than ideal for precision work. With a lighter trigger and a more stable support setup, there's a good chance these groups could tighten up even more. The plan from here is simple. Adjust the trigger and get more practice behind the rifle. After spending some time behind the rifle, a few first impressions start to form. The recoil is very manageable, which makes it easier to stay on target and observe impacts through the scope. The rifle itself feels stable throughout the shot cycle, and the overall shooting experience is smooth and predictable. Even with factory ammunition and a brand new setup, the accuracy we're seeing is already promising. The groups aren't perfect yet, but the consistency between shots suggests that the system has real potential once everything is fully dialed in. With a few adjustments and more time on the range, there's a good chance this setup could perform even better. And after seeing these early results, one thing becomes clear. I can definitely understand why so many shooters are starting to get excited about the .25 Creedmoor. After seeing the early results, it's easy to understand why the .25 Creedmoor has been getting so much attention. The rifle feels good, the recoil is manageable, and the accuracy potential is clearly there. But this is where the bigger conversation begins. Excitement alone doesn't automatically mean something is necessary. The shooting world already has a long list of cartridges that perform extremely well in both competition and long-range shooting. Many of them have years, even decades, of proven performance behind them, so the real question becomes more interesting than just whether this rifle shoots well. The real question is whether the .25 Creedmoor actually brings something meaningfully different to the table, or if it's simply another option in an already crowded field. After this first range session, the overall picture is becoming clearer. The design behind the .25 Creedmoor is clearly focused on efficiency, and the early accuracy potential from this rifle is encouraging. The recoil is manageable. The shooting experience feels stable, and it seems well suited for precision competition environments. At the same time, there are still some unanswered questions. It will take time to see how widely this cartridge is adopted and whether more manufacturers continue to support it in the long run. For now, the conclusion is fairly balanced. The .25 Creedmoor may not replace any of the established cartridges that shooters already trust, but it could very well carve out its own niche in the precision shooting world. Now I'm curious what you think. Is the .25 Creedmoor the future or just another trend? Be honest. Are you excited about it? Or do we already have enough cartridges?